leadership thing and how does it work in the church. But for those of you who maybe hold hat at leadership, I'm hoping to give you guys some fresh perspective on how we do it here at Shadow Mountain. For those of you who are new faces to me, I just, by show of hands, has anybody here ever taken leadership courses in work or just read something on the web or maybe at church? Yeah. Has anybody here ever been a parent? All right, you qualify. Anybody been married? I qualify. We'll explore some of that as best we can. I need to grab one more table. This one will be long enough. Let me see. Did she take? Hey Bethany, I'll need one more cable when you get a second. That gal over there in black, Russ, kind of hustling around. That's Bethany, and she's one of the admins that works in the small group department. So, as you look at your folders. And if you need folders and you don't have one yet, they're on the counter over there. Chairs, do we still have any chairs? Bethany, you've got one chair? Okay, you can get to the edge of some tables if you need. And we have an empty seat, oh my goodness. I feel like a theater guy, I need a flashlight. Seat right there. Thanks, Diego. Here's a chair here. Does anybody need a chair?
I've got 4 back here.
We got 4 chairs back here if you need. We'll bring this one around. Thank you. That belly table. Yeah, we did. Here's another chair if you need it, okay? I'm just going to leave it right here just in case. We have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches back here if you want. Folder that doesn't have one.
Are you going to pray over the peanut butter sandwiches?
Yeah, we're going to multiply them as best we can. Yeah. What's that? Peanut butter and jelly. I went to, when I was in college, I was broke. I was known as the peanut butter, jelly, and pretzel guy. You know those pretzels they sell that has like the cheese on it? It has the cheese. They're like the little ones that are kind of loopy, and they put some kind of cheese powder on it, which I'm sure is not real cheese. That was me. I was the peanut butter, jelly, and cheese guy. Well, let's do this. Let me give you just a little picture of what's happening in your folder so you get a sense of navigation. And then I'll give you a little overview of what we're doing, and then we'll go from there. So if you open up your folders, the left side is going to be all support material. We will draw attention to some of that, and at different times, that may be something that you may want to look at. The key thing in there is, at the end of the class, there's an opportunity for you to say, hey, I would like to go the next step. And that's something that we'll draw attention to when that time comes. On the right side are going to be the lessons. Now, there's 3 lessons. Today is lesson 1, and then we have the next 2 weeks for lesson 2 and 3. Some of you may have come in here and said, I thought this was just one class. I want my money back. There's no refund. But today is a chance for you to begin to wade into this thing of leadership and begin to say, hey, is this something I want to go to the next step? The next step for you would be come back next week. And if you like that, come back the next week. How this is going to work is, today is all about community. The church is made of people, regardless of if they've had leadership training or not. So we want you to have a really good understanding of what the Bible says and what we're going for at Shadow Mountain as we define community. Whether you do small groups, or you got into an ABF, or you go to another ministry, these tools will travel with you. And we just want to make sure you understand that we're going for this type of community in every ministry of Shadow Mountain. So today will be about community. Next week is all about our theology and philosophy of leadership. And that's just us kind of cracking open the Bible and cracking open reality and saying, here's how leadership works in the real world. And then the third week is all about the practical tools. We'll give you 10 practical tools of how to begin to apply leadership wherever you're at. A parent, a husband, a wife, an employee, an employer. And we have an ex-military guy. Maybe you're in the military. This stuff can even work there, believe it or not. And of course ministry, this will definitely translate into ministry. So the thing I want to make sure you understand, there's only 3 things we're going for in these 3 classes, but we will talk about all 3 of these themes in each class. The first thing we're going for is the Bible teaches that a community requires a safe environment. Now, this isn't on your notes anywhere, so if you write this down, you're welcome to, but I'll remind you. We're going for a safe environment. And some of us may have different ideas of what a safe environment looks like. Some of us may have been told we were in a safe environment, and as we look back, we're like, no, that wasn't safe at all. I didn't like that. And I didn't like going, and there was something about it that felt weird. I didn't like it. So we'll talk about the differences between a safe and unsafe environment. The second thing we're going to be talking about in all 3 lessons is how do you help people get connected relationally? That may have also been something in your time of Christian life, or maybe just community life, if it was outside the church, that you may have been a little foggy on. What does a relationship that's healthy, safe, look like? And how do you know it's ongoing, a safe place to be? So, yeah, come on in. There's a folder right there to your right on that counter. And then I think we have a chair right over here. Somebody's waving at you like they know you and they like you. They know you. We're going to start there. So first is safe environment. Secondly is how do you help people connect relationally. And the third is, as you're moving in this safe environment with other people in relationship, what does that mean when you focus on biblical truth? So biblical truth is part 3. We want to show you how all 3 of those work together. And what the Bible has both taught and modeled is if you're in a safe environment and you're getting connected, as you focus on the Bible, your ability to experience change and life growth goes way up. Way, way up. Because God modeled this exact thing that we're teaching throughout Scripture, especially in Jesus' time here on earth. So we're going to just dig into this and go from there. But lesson 1 is Community 101, and I'm going to pray for us, and then we'll get started. I think they're going to close those doors. Will you double check if they're going to close their doors? The young marrieds?
Yeah.
They normally do, but sometimes they forget. They're not as hot as we are here, so we'll keep our doors open. Temperature okay, nobody's sweating, nobody's going to faint on me, okay? Start to feel faint, raise your hand. I'll say, are you testifying? Or? Oh wait, we're Baptist? No, okay, we're all right. All right, let me pray and then we'll get started. God, thank you today. Thank you for the people here who have answered the question, are you willing to learn about leadership? They're here. And I pray today and over the next couple of weeks that we answer those deeper questions. God, what are you saying to me about leading others? And I pray that if there are some fears, that we can begin to dispel those fears and show that leadership is about following you well. It's not really about making sure other people change or grow, but about following you well. So may we follow you well this morning. May this be a safe environment. May we begin to get connected relationally as we focus on your biblical truth. In Jesus' name, amen. So just in the way of me kind of getting to know you guys a little bit, give me some just loose definitions of community. I'd like to hear what you guys have learned in your time as people and maybe as Christians. What have you learned about community to be able to sort of define it in a word or in a sentence? What does community mean to you?
People with like interests.
Environment, people with like interests, yeah. Togetherness. Say? Involvement, yeah, a couple more. Service. Differences.
True community requires vulnerability.
Vulnerability, yeah, okay. So with vulnerability sometimes comes the word risk, right? Sometimes it feels a little risky to be vulnerable. But what I want to do today is I want to dive into that. What does the Bible say about that? So first of all, let's talk about what we see on our notes here, the plan that God has. He actually has a plan for community, right? And so we're going to play with that a little bit. With his plan for the church, and the church has community. His plan is 2 parts. 1, right there on your notes, reach those far from God. Reach those far from God. What's another word for that? We have a word in the church we use. Outreach?
Backsliders.
Backsliders, reach those guys, yeah. What else?
Witness.
Witness, evangelism, yeah. So we have this idea of reaching out. And at some point we've had somebody or a group of people reach out to us somewhere. Some of us may have grown up in the church, but even then, there was a point where we had a before and an after experience. Before we were kind of attending church, we didn't really know if we were Christians or not, and then there was a point where we made that decision to become a follower of Jesus Christ. And the title Christian implies. So that's the first thing that we've been called to do. Get people in this family, the family of God. Secondly, is to mature God's people. Mature. M-A-T-U-R-E. My dad says it's pronounced mature, but he's from Indiana. And I'm now officially from San Diego. And I say mature. How do you guys say it? Mature? Mature with the CH kind of sound? Okay, good. I feel like I'm in good company then. He used to always correct me. No, it's mature. But he has a master's degree, so those guys are a little nutty. Present company exempt, if anybody has a master's degree. Yeah, so we have reaching this far from God, and then we have maturity. Now here's the problem with maturity. It's a little bit more squishy. It's not defined. There's not so much a before and after, right? If you aren't a Christian and you are, very clear, there was some kind of a line. But in maturity, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do you do it? But my guess is as you look back on your life, you may see seasons or chapters of maturity. Yeah? Maybe some of you got into the Christian faith and maybe you struggled with certain aspects of what the Bible taught. And then there was a point where you said, I'm not struggling with that part of the Bible anymore. That could be a mark of maturity. Some of you who have gotten married, maybe you had these ideas about marriage when you first got married. And then one day you woke up and said, that stuff doesn't work here. It's not working in this marriage. What's going on? What am I missing? And you realized we have to mold this relationship unique to this marriage. And so you learn something when you mature. And then maybe for those of you who've led either at work or in the church or in other type organizations, you've even come to the realization that this maturity thing's different. And so the thing about maturity is it happens in stages. The idea of becoming a Christian is kind of all in one. Boom, it happens. Now, the truth of the matter is, even those who come to faith in Jesus Christ, they have their own journey to that point. But we still sometimes sort of look at it and score it. Well, they weren't, and now they are. But maturity is an ongoing thing. And the good news is it never has to end. Maturity keeps going and going and going. But to somebody who doesn't have an experience of helping somebody grow, that can feel overwhelming. It can to me. I have to help this person grow up. What does that mean? The good news is you don't have to actually do any of the growing. That's Jesus' job. And the Holy Spirit inside a person's life. So those are the two pieces. Now what we want to do is we want to move to this component piece at the bottom. The components of life-changing small group. This is where we begin to look at what does the world kind of say and what does the Bible say and how do they kind of meet up. Life-changing small groups, and we define that loosely by community, embrace safety. Embrace safety. I want to hear from a few people in here of a safe experience you've had in the community. It can be very small. Hey, I went into a group, maybe it was a club or it could have been a church group, and I never felt like I was going to be hurt, or I didn't have the experience of being hurt, or it could be something else. But what was an experience you had of feeling safe? Yeah.
I used to have an accountability partner that I met with every Friday, and we would share, make sure that we were on track with everything, and I knew that nothing would ever go outside of that conversation between me and him.
Yeah. So a confidential relationship. Okay. What else? Another safe experience you've had. Yeah.
A small recent Bible study group I was in for weeks, and because we had a life, we've all experienced the same. We had something in common.
Something in common. Yeah, a
So-
shared interest. Okay, good. What else? Safe environment, safe community.
Hopefully, child.
Hopefully childhood.
I go to a Bible study called BSF where
Oh, yeah.
where the just the agreement is that we are not allowed to talk about the family members, we are not allowed to, but just your own. So that
Yeah.
makes it safe, and then there is no gossip.
Okay, good. So we've had some experiences. Now what I want to do is do kind of contrast to that. I'm not looking for personal stories so much because I'm not trying to embarrass or put you on the spot, but how would you define an unsafe experience? How would you define what that looks like, feels like, maybe even a scenario of what a safe environment might be?
I have one.
Go here and then here, yeah.
Me, okay, so I was in an IFB church couple for about 25 years.
Uh-huh.
So it was kind of unacceptable to be that vulnerable. So I found now in the last 10 years or so, it's much more, it's safe
Okay.
to grow
Yeah.
and be okay to say I need to grow up. You're a carnal, absolutely reprobate kind of thing. You know?
Yeah. Kind of lose those titles, huh?
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's just such a, it's helped, my growth was stunted because of it, but now I feel free from it.
Okay. Good. Good. Unsafe.
I would say it happened in different places, but mostly if we go somewhere and I find that people talk about someone who's not present, that makes me feel that this place is maybe, if I'm not there, that means I'll repeat the same position.
Yeah. So you said that word not being not present, not in that.
Yeah, if they talk about
Experience.
someone that is not here,
Ah,
that
got it.
means
Yeah.
They're gonna talk about you when you're not.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very good, yeah, that can be very, can make you feel vulnerable in a very scary way. Like if we're talking about so-and-so, I can't make it next week, so am I next? Or I saw another hand, or did I miss? Yeah.
We have small children, so for me, if I go to some place and there's not a safe feeling for my children, like there's just like one person trying to take care of them in a place by themselves that I can't get to, or there's not like some way of verifying who's taking care of them. Like in this church, they're very safe with checking the children in and out and verifying that you're their parents when they give them back to you. Like we went to the church one time and the Sunday school was just like in a separate building. It was like, old people, so I wasn't really like this little scared, but it was like kind of far, and I felt like I wouldn't want my kid to go there all the time because I could see potential that something bad could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that can be scary for a parent. I have a 5-year-old.
Kids.
Yeah, I know what, now the problem with my 5-year-old is she thinks she's in charge, so. No matter where we drop her, yeah, if we can drop her off in the middle of Disneyland, she'll probably take over the park. But not every child has that sense of command and control, so. Yeah, we're always dialing our daughter down, like, there actually are places that are unsafe, she has no clue yet, so. She assumes everybody wants to do what she says. That's always fun. One more on an unsafe, yeah.
Well, I think maybe a safe place would become unsafe if there's an inconsistency in like attendance, or
Okay.
there's no new people that are always coming
Ah.
in. So it kind of changes,
Yeah.
you know, the groundwork to which
Yeah.
to create a safety.
Yeah, we've had some people in small groups, leaders, say it's kind of hard to keep the conversation moving because we've had a couple people show up and now we have to almost go back in time, help them catch up to begin moving forward in time. Welcome Joyce Tepfer. Nobody knows who she is. Let's just talk about the Joyce Tepfer in the room. Can you check, Tim? I think we're getting cold now, right? Everybody's putting their jackets on. Okay, yeah, and I may have taken that down too far. Yeah, I'm making a very cold, unsafe environment. Okay, so we've kind of begun playing with this idea of safety. We read a couple passages that talk about safety in the Bible. In Ephesians 4, it says, "Be kind and compassionate with one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you." In Romans 12, it says, "Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourself." And so these scripture passages are below to fill in there. But there's a number of words the Bible uses. And here are some just kind of in highlight. Kindness, compassion, forgiveness, encourage, build up, humility, gentleness, unity, and blessing. So those are safe words. But here's what we want to do. We want to make it very accessible to the idea of leadership and community. And so that's your next fill-in on the next page. Our groups, whatever that group is, have to be places where it's okay to be less than perfect. Less than perfect. And that is easier said than done if you've ever tried it. Our brokenness, as the Bible teaches, does an amazing job of giving us the ability to kind of put on a false representation of ourselves and to allow for the false representation of others. And so that's a piece of leadership that's on the leader to begin to move this imperfect piece into the community. And I'm not saying imperfect toward license or allowances against what the Bible teaches. I'm saying imperfect toward the reality that we're all sinful and broken. We're having a progressive victory over sin as we grow in Christ and grow with one another. So this idea of perfect. Now, here's a point of vulnerability. My assumption is we probably have some perfectionists in the group. Group this size, generally there's a pretty good percentage. So let's just try being vulnerable. Who here would self-identify as a perfectionist in their life? Anybody? Got a few? So even before you show up in community, you can be kind of hard on yourself, right? So that's just a part of the process of leadership, is knowing yourself well enough to know, how do I show up? And am I going to be allowing for, in my model of leadership, this idea of perfection? So a few words that go with imperfect that I like to bring in, and these are extra, they're not in the fill-in, but you can put them down if you'd like. A sign of a person who's okay with imperfection, they're unhurried. They're just not in a big rush. And I don't know about you, but when I meet somebody who's not in a big rush, I kind of relax. Like, okay, so there's not like a bunch of things I have to check off really quick before you're okay with me. We're just kind of hanging out here. Okay, that feels a little better. A second one would be, and this kind of goes along with unhurried, but patient. Patient. Allowing for mistakes would be another way to put that, but patient. I really enjoy, and this doesn't always apply in life. There's places where it doesn't. First responders cannot be unhurried. You don't want a fireman just kind of wandering into the firehouse. Is there a fire somewhere? No, that's not what you want. You want somebody. But in community, you want that sense of, we're here and we're just gonna keep being here. And we'll get done today what we can get done, but we'll move forward next week in relationship. And, I tell people who are leading, you have to move at the speed of the slowest person in the room. And you gotta be okay with that. Otherwise, you're doing something different than community. Maybe you're doing a class. A class doesn't always need to wait for the slowest person, but a community does. We wait for those people. And the last one I like to talk about is alignment. Alignment. Alignment means we're here for a reason, and that's what we talked about at the beginning. We're here to be safe with each other. We're here to have a relational connection, and we're here to focus on biblical truth. And so that alignment really helps, because then people understand, hey, what are the rules of engagement? I don't know about you, but I've had people tell me this is a safe place, and it's not been. And I've tried to act safe, and then all of a sudden I realize, oh wait, but there's certain rules that are unspoken, and I just stumbled on one, and now I feel like a total idiot, because everybody in the room is looking at me like I'm the weirdo, right? And so part of the leadership process is to model it in such a way where there's no question. So that's a part of the imperfect piece. Questions on that one, because I want to make sure that's kind of a big deal to us, this safe thing. Questions or comments?
I like the fact that you said to learn to relax, because you feel like, even in a community setting, you might feel like there's still an agenda and you gotta get through stuff. And what better way than to get to know your community better
Yeah.
than in a more relaxed state.
Yeah.
So that really spoke to me.
Okay.
You don't feel like you have to rush through, you take
Good.
time. Yeah,
Good.
that spoke to me a lot.
Excellent. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad that did. What else? What else did you guys?
I just wanna make sure that this is correct I hear you talk about being unhurried and
Mhm.
patient. I think a mark of a good leader is unhurried but on time.
Yeah.
Because being on time is a very respectful thing to a group.
Yeah.
Starting on time, finishing on time.
Right.
And so I just wanna make sure that I'm on the right track.
Yeah, look on the right side of your folder. Is there something in there that, what's our current title for the covenant? Let's make a deal?
No, I think it just says covenant, small group covenant.
Does it say small
It's
group
like
on the left side, left side?
Left side.
Anything that says small group covenant?
I think it's the third one back.
There it is, yeah. Can I borrow that for a second? Looks like this. To your point, Sherry, this is a part of what we do in the small group ministry. We also share this with some of the other ministries. We believe in being covenant groups. It's a biblical model where we agree to things. And if you'll notice at the very top, we agree to come to group and we define that in dates and time. And that's a piece of it, yeah. But once we're in the environment, once we're in that time frame, so let's say we as a group said, hey, we're gonna have a small group. This would not qualify, by the way. It's considered a large group in the small group world. But we would say, okay, for the next so many weeks, we're gonna meet from 6 to 8. Let's say that was our time frame. And we're gonna start at 6. And we're gonna end at 8. Yeah, we would very much ask the people coming to the group to honor that time frame. But in between 6 and 8 o'clock, we're not gonna be in a rush. We're just not gonna get there. What else? One more thing maybe that stuck out at you or you thought, that's interesting. All right, let's go to letter B. Life-changing small groups pay attention to the truth. Pay attention to the truth. And somewhere on your paper, oh good. You can write a big T and a little t. Because this gets to the community piece. I like using this idea of embracing the truth. The Bible teaches a progressive growth process. We call it maturity at the beginning of the lesson. But if I were to put all of your growth experiences on a timeline, none of our timelines would be straight. They'd be all weird directions and wanderings, because growth doesn't happen in a straight line. And what we would find is that some of us came to certain understandings and certain experiences of God at a certain age, that others may have taken 10 more years to come to that specific experience or understanding of God. And so that would be what I would call that lowercase t. That would be our understanding, our experience of God's truth. And so that's a big piece of leadership. I don't know if you've been in a scenario where you were working with somebody or under somebody who was leading you, especially in like a Bible lesson or training, and they were holding you to God's ultimate, full truth. And you felt like you didn't know enough, or you felt like you didn't have the right answers right now. And that's absolutely normal, because we're all on a different trajectory of where we're at in the growth process of God. And so as a leader, it's so important to say, hey, I'm going to hold people to wherever they're at right now and trust that God is moving them through this community into a greater awareness of His love, of His grace, of His acceptance, of His truth. So tell me a little bit about what you hear when you hear this little t, big T. Have you guys ever had the little t experience, but you were held to a high T expectation? The idea of you got to know just the right amount of information about the Bible to be accepted here. You have to behave a certain way. I'd love to hear a generic experience. No names, no dates, no addresses, no phone numbers.
A lot of discipleship I've experienced is that teachers want to cookie cutter the Christian. So the teacher wants everybody to be like the teacher and understanding what the teacher's maturity level is.
Yeah.
And then you're a younger, immature
Yeah, and that's gonna disrupt safety right off the bat.
Right.
You're gonna feel very unsafe. Yeah.
I had an experience where, people didn't understand the language. You say salvation, you say this, and you say that, and you know the Christian lingo. And, I actually had a whole Bible study that left me.
You just got lost.
No, they literally left.
Oh my
The guy
goodness.
left and said, we're gonna start our own because we don't understand what you're saying.
Wow.
And so,
Yeah. I have a friend who calls that Christianese.
yeah.
There's like this subcultural language that Christians speak, and
When you think about saying something, I got the blood of Christ covering me.
I'm a little creeped out by that, yeah. I've seen some movies where that's been not the blood of Christ, but just creepy, bloody images. Before I was a pastor, of course. I'm watching those movies now, but, okay, what else? What other experiences or observations about this little T versus big T truth? I'd like to get one more in if I can, yeah.
I felt like I did it to myself when I was like beginning the journey to learn more to Christ. I was overwhelmed of my lack of understanding, and I wanted to kind of magically understand everything,
Yeah.
but I can't, I don't. So just kind of getting there and just reminding myself that it's a process.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things, I used to do a lot of work with the middle school ministry here, and we used to talk about they have a window of time in that person's life, that child's life. They get it from 6th grade through 8th grade, and then that child moves on with God. But it's very tempting sometimes for leaders to think, I gotta get it all in these few years. And that's the beauty of the body of Christ and the sovereignty of God. We don't have to do that. Our job is to give what we have in the time that we've been given with that person or that group of people as a leader. So, yeah, this is just something that I like to use, and it's a great picture for me because sometimes I'll meet somebody and they rub me the wrong way. And I have to check myself. Is that a problem with the person, or is that a problem I have with that person? And if it's a problem I have with that person, I gotta be like, well, maybe it's just their little T. Like maybe their little T's different than my little T. And I need to give them some grace now, because they're still in the process of growth, that maybe I've laid to rest something that they're wrestling with. And a part of the leadership process in community is allowing that wrestling and getting used to the fact that maybe somebody struggles with something that God's doing in their life and that they're learning in the Bible. So, any more questions on this truth piece? No? Good. All right. Well, then let's go to the growth formula. And this is extremely oversimplified. So don't think this is the absolute on anything. But in Ephesians 4:15 it says, instead, speaking the truth in love, we will in all things grow up into him who is the head, that is Christ. So the three words that pop out is truth, love, and grow. And so what we've come up with is this sort of diagram here. Grace plus truth over time equals growth. And the Bible, if you do some word studies or if you've been in some classes where they talk about this grace-truth relationship, you find out that grace always precedes truth. Always. And that's on purpose. In God's wisdom, he said there's got to be grace first. People have to feel accepted. They have to feel safe. They have to feel connected. And what we say in small groups is a lot of grace leads to a little bit of truth. That leads to a lot of grace. That leads to a little bit of truth. And that keeps us from being legalistic, being self-righteous, being judgmental. What's that? Yeah, it keeps us from walking into a path, kind of like what Jesus got upset at the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all those guys about, you know. Those are the only people he ever got grumpy with. Did you ever notice that? I don't remember Jesus ever being grumpy with sinners, but he had a big problem with people who were acting as if they had something that everybody else didn't. So this grace plus truth over time, I hope, becomes something you can self-apply in your own life, in your own context. But my assumption, maybe you guys have your own journey about this, my assumption is you may have had experiences where truth preceded grace in an experience. Anybody have one of those? Yeah, I hear some, yeah. Like, I don't want to talk about that. That was bad. Yeah. So we want to make sure we stay away from that as best we can. Now, here's the beauty of what we're describing. It gives you as a leader permission to make mistakes too. Oh, it makes me feel better. Because I was making mistakes all over the place this morning. Right now, I mean, we had problems with our tech, and you guys all wandered in here, and you're crunched in here to this room. I wish we had a bigger room for you. I'm hyper aware of that, but nobody, I don't think, I haven't seen anybody like this. Jerk. You jerk. Yeah, you're just.
Oh, I'm doing that.
Yeah. So it's such a nice place to be where grace precedes truth. Now here's something I want to give you just as a kind of an extra credit. You don't have to do this if you don't want. But I want to say in your own life, give yourself permission to do grace first in your own life. One of the biggest lies Satan tells us is it's all on you. As a leader, it's all on you. And I want to say it's not. I mean, my goodness, if God could create the entire universe, if Jesus' blood, as our metaphor continues to cover all sins for all time, really, what have you got to carry, really? You've got your stuff, your responsibilities, and there are times when burdens land on you that are heavy. But I want to encourage you guys, as you're wrestling with this idea of leadership, give yourself some grace. It's okay. There's plenty to go around. We're not going to run out. So that's just a little extra credit. Anything else on this grace plus truth over time equals growth? What's that?
Did you answer letter C? No?
Not there yet. No, that's where we're heading
I
next.
just didn't want to miss it.
That's all right. That's all right. Got a runner. Run into the next letter. Let's go.
No agenda.
You know, we're just unhurried. We don't.
I need this.
Yeah. Gotta. Yes.
So where does discipline and accountability come to that point?
It's in there. Yeah. We talk more about that in weeks 2 and 3. Yeah. But I want you to hear there's a precedent, and we're going to get to some of that even now. But what I have found as a small group pastor, but even I was a business person before I was a small group pastor for years. And the thing I noticed was everybody was in a hurry to get to truth. In business, it's called the bottom line. Just give me the bottom line. And whoever asked that question clearly wasn't involved in the process to get to that bottom line because they were impatient. They tended to get upset pretty easily. And the people who were actually trying to get the work done, they didn't get any understanding from that person. And so it became this very kind of dysfunctional experience. And so we're just taking time now to say, start there. But there's absolutely a place for discipline and accountability and all those kind of things too. So let's go to letter C. Unless anybody else? Yeah? Okay. Letter C, life-changing small groups lead people to vulnerability. Somebody said that earlier. Vulnerability. So what you're going to notice here is we're kind of creating a little bit of a process that people experience. You got safety in place, and now you've got truth. And what happens is, if you're modeling that and leading that way, and the person modeling it and leading it begins to be vulnerable, other people begin to want to be vulnerable too. You may have had this experience. I had a coach in middle school, best coach I ever had. His name was Randy Irwin. I'm 5'9", he was like 6'5". Tall guy, big guy. Back then I was like, 5 feet. I was in middle school. So he was this giant. Nicest guy I ever met. Never in a hurry. Always worked well with us. We were cross-country runners. And under his coaching, which was very grace first plus truth, we enjoyed an undefeated season. We never lost a running meet. And then I, in 7th grade, moved from the slowest runner to the fastest runner. And in 8th grade, I actually had an undefeated personal season. So I got a first place at every meet we ran. And he never yelled at us. He never beat us up. It was crazy. Well, literally, not like figuratively beat us up. Not like Bobby Knight beat us up, for those of you who know about that. But no, just he was never hard on us. He was allowing for our talent and our skill and his model to allow our competitiveness to rise out of that. Now, I know we all have different experiences like that, but I just want to give you, there are places where this works. And he was very vulnerable. If he was having a bad day, he'd talk to them. Guys, I've had a rough day today. How about you? We talk about our rough days. I don't know what rough days a 6th grader had, but we had. And he'd allow allow for that. And then what happened is we actually wanted to run harder for him because he cared, right? And so that's this idea of vulnerability. But what I want to sort of highlight right now about this is vulnerability is a hard thing to get to. I don't know about you guys. Like, we will be maybe 10% vulnerable in a class like this. But to get to, say, more than 50% vulnerability, there's something that's got to be there. And that's kind of what we're building here, is this equation, or maybe this recipe. How does this work? And so I want to give you the phenomenon. Any John Ortberg fans in here? He's spoken here a few times. John Ortberg. He's written a bunch of cool books. And one of his books, he talks about the imposter's phenomenon. We all have it. Now, the imposter's phenomenon is a harken back to Genesis 3, if you remember when Adam and Eve realized they were naked and they were ashamed. And to cover over their shame, because they were naked, they sewed fig leaves and covered over their nakedness. And that's a thematic element throughout our lives. We are born into shame because this is a broken, sinful world, and we're naturally covering over kind of what we do wrong or what people won't accept. My daughter's 5, and she's already learning to lie, right? She's figured it out. Now, she's not quite to the point where she's not telling us she's lying. She lies and then said, I just lied. Thank you, honey. But she's, you know, as we begin to work through this, we're going to find that will become more and more natural for her to find out, how can I cut the corner here, and she'll lie. So vulnerability is a big piece. And here's a great, I'm sorry, the imposter's phenomenon is a big piece. Here's a great kind of picture of that. And this comes from a guy's perspective. So ladies, I'm not a lady, and I don't know if I can give you a good lady's perspective, so I'll give you a guy's perspective. Let's say I buy a Jeep, an old Jeep, but I want to be like one of those rock hopper dudes, right? And this Jeep needs a lot of work, so I do the work I can the best I can, and I'm driving this thing, and all of a sudden it breaks down. And I'm working on the Jeep to the best of my ability, but whatever's wrong is beyond my ability. So I get it towed into the shop, and the mechanic looks at it and says, oh, you got a bad injector. Now here's the imposter's phenomenon. I say, I thought that's what the problem was. That's the imposter's phenomenon, right? Instead of saying, I don't have a clue what's wrong with my Jeep, can you help me out? I don't want him to know that I don't know. And so I dole out a little bit of, yeah, probably would have hit him also too. So that's what the imposter's phenomenon looks like. And what we want to do is we want to remove that from the piece of what it looks like to be a leader of community. But look on page 3 at the top. I'm just going to hit these pretty quick because I want to move on. But I want you to have this so you can kind of reflect on this in the future. What might keep us from self-disclosure or vulnerability? What makes us feel unsafe? Previous wounds? Harsh personalities? The leader failing to model vulnerability, moving too quickly? Truth without grace? Current pain? Or performance issues? That one at the bottom, I think a lot of adults live in, feeling that they need to perform to earn approval. I feel that way sometimes, in the right setting. If only I had this experience or this degree or this credential or whatever, or if I knew this person, then I'd be in at every end. So vulnerability is something that we model and invite people into, we don't demand. Again, we're creating safety first, so this is a part of that. Questions on that one? Vulnerability? Yeah.
In relationships, if trust is broken, I'm no longer going to become vulnerable to someone who's
Right.
broken that trust.
Right.
So I'm assuming that would work within the same framework in a group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in groups. I've visited groups from time to time, or I've even been a part of groups, and there was a point where safety left. At the time, I didn't know that because I wasn't as dialed in with this kind of stuff then, but there was just something in my gut, and I just didn't feel like, I don't like this place anymore. I don't like this group. It wasn't that I didn't like any one person, but I just didn't feel safe. I didn't know that's what it was, but as I look back, I realized that as a pastor, I've been in some groups over the years where I've walked into the group, and it's clear from the top, this isn't a safe group. There's certain things that just, there's there's kind of some rules. And I didn't know the rules yet, so I just kind of kept quiet, you know, but I could tell. Something's going on here, and it's kind of stifled. There's a little bit of a stiffness to how the group interacts with each other. So.
But if I was gonna try to put a word to it, in a group, if you allowed gossiping, you would lose that trust and vulnerability.
Oh, yeah, huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost immediately.
And what about hierarchy? You know,
Yeah.
where some are more advanced in their, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And it just happens over time. You suddenly, like, you feel separate
Mm-hmm.
because they know so much more than you do.
Yeah, yeah.
And you feel less than, maybe?
Well, and to that point, in the leadership conversation here, some of you may be feeling that. I don't know enough about the Bible to be a leader in a church. And that's just a part of what we're dealing with right here. There's a message that some people carry like that. I hope that doesn't make you self-eject from your leadership journey here at Shadow Mountain. Because we want to walk with you and help you with that message, because we don't need perfection in leadership. We don't need great Bible knowledge in leadership. I mean, if you ever want to come to a place where we don't need more Bible knowledge, it's Shadow Mountain Community Church. My goodness, we've got one of the best teachers in the world of the Bible. We build our curriculum off of his sermons in small groups. But then we also, I don't know if you've rubbed shoulders with any of our other pastors, but our pastors have amazing Bible knowledge. Well, I like to use their Bible knowledge to help me with my lack of Bible knowledge, to help our leaders with their lack of Bible knowledge. And so we were never looking at a leader to say they have to have a certain level of biblical knowledge. Now, character is a different conversation. We want you to feel like you're ready to lead, and we want you to feel like God's leading you to lead. But if you're nervous or scared or whatever, we'll work that stuff out. Now, we've got a whole program that we can help you guys, and we'll give you all the skill you need and all the help you need. So, but let's jump to letter D. Life-changing small groups or communities love through caregiving. Caregiving. Caregiving is one of the pieces that we offer that's an invitation to vulnerability. Come on, come be vulnerable with us. So if you're taking care of somebody, and I'll give you a quick story, maybe you've had something like this. I had a small group years ago, long time ago. My wife and I opened our home and had a small group and had a bunch of people come in. And there was a couple that we knew prior to the small group. They were neighbors in our, where we lived. And they had told us a few weeks before the small group started that the husband had to file bankruptcy. And they had just gotten married like a few months before that all happened. And so their immediate reaction was, well, we shouldn't be in the small group, because our lives are pretty messed up right now. And my wife and I were like, well, why don't you come and, you don't talk about that if you don't want to. We won't tell them. Don't let that be a reason why you don't come to the small group. But the man was very kind of reserved and introverted, but his wife was I got to tell everybody everything. And the longer I don't, the more stressed I become. And so they lasted 1 week, and then the second week she just popped. She couldn't keep it quiet. She's crying, and she's so ashamed. We're going to be kicked out of the house. We're going to lose the house. So she's kind of exposing, being very, very vulnerable. And I was the leader, and I was just learning a lot of this stuff. And I'm like, I kind of had one of those moments where I'm not really sure what to do here. She's having this moment. I'm not real skilled in this yet. I'm not sure what to do. I think I should probably say something. And before that thought finalized, somebody else in the group said, well, when are you moving? Like completely just walked with that conversation. And she said, oh, we got to move in a couple weeks. And then the husband kind of chimed in on the details. Well, who's moving? Well, we don't have anybody. Well, I got a pickup truck. And then somebody else said, I got a pickup truck. Somebody else said, well, I got 2 boys in high school and they're on the football team. They can carry heavy things. And before you knew it, the whole group, without me, the leader, even having to step in, had rallied around their need, had given them care. And guess who was the most committed couple for the rest of that small group? Boom, they were the most vulnerable. They'd bring anything to the group. and they were willing to wrestle with the group. And then ironically, everybody else began to show up at a higher level because she took that risk and she shared her life. And the group was just amazing. And you don't always get great groups like that, but man, when you get them, you love them, you know? And it was really powerful. So that's what we talk about when we talk about this idea of caregiving. Maybe you guys have a story like that. Do we have one or two stories where you've been cared for well and you just rose up to the next level of involvement in whatever that was?
Yeah, a few weeks ago, one of the girls didn't come to group because her mother was going to have serious surgery the next day.
Mhm.
That was understandable. The next week she came, and there are 3 sisters in this family, and she had took the lead to tell the other 2 sisters how things were about Mom's health at this stage. I guess she was acting as mother, sort of. The 2 girls, the other 2 sisters, took offense to this and turned on her. So the next week she comes to group and she shares this with us. And we told her, you did the right thing by speaking up. She was feeling she had done wrong. We said, you planted seeds. They just haven't matured yet. And we're just waiting for her to tell us that the sisters have come back to her. Mom's surgery was fine. It is serious, but she's an older woman. But things do take time, and we are very patient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she needed us to reassure her that she hadn't done wrong.
Yeah.
Speaking up.
So you were able to care for her in that way, yeah. Another one? Another story like that? Either caring well or being cared well?
When I was a young Christian, first became a Christian, you know, before then I drank and I had an anger problem. When I became a Christian, I had to deal with all these emotions and I went in basically clinical depression. But I had a small group that just like surrounded me with love and picked me up, and it was really instrumental for me to kind of bloom as a Christian because of that intimacy that we have in this small group.
Yeah, so you've experienced at a level where you saw the growth that came out of that. Yeah, good. One more maybe? Yeah.
I guess this is on the opposite end of the spectrum, but I moved here to San Diego about a year ago when I was trying to find connections. And I was in several, like a lot of small groups, and I kept mentioning I want a community, and I need a place to stay or people to hang out with instead, and stuff. And always the response was, we'll be praying for you, you know, we'll be praying for you, and never get anything else, any other feedback from them or anything. So I can relate to how important it is for people to say, hey, if you want to just come and hang out while I'm busy doing such and such or whatever, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting, back to the Christianese sort of thing, how as a leader we need to be thinking through what we say and how we say it to somebody, because as we begin to learn somebody's story, they may not have the same vocabulary we do in talking about the Bible, community, Christ. And that, I've heard that before. People have said, they said they prayed for me, but God, I needed a friend. Yeah, and that can be tough to try and navigate that and to find that. And I think something else that you're touching on that we all experience in our culture, and I'm talking about sort of the United States culture, is this idea of the overuse of the word community. I think it's lost its definition at some level, and I think it's become a little bit of a malleable word. I mean, people, the Facebook community is the thing that I don't even know what that is. It doesn't make sense to me, only because I've spent so much time in kind of this arena of what we're doing today. But that Facebook community can create for people a sense of what community is that's not necessarily community. Back in the day, they used to call your persona on the web the avatar. I don't know if they still use that, but it was basically, it's who you present yourself to be. And I read a lot of Facebook stuff, and I think to myself, well, I'm getting a lot of people's highlight reels. I'm getting all the good. I'm getting all the happy. But I'm not getting a lot of the reality, because everybody has happy and sad. Everybody has good and bad days. and in community that we're talking about, both of those realities are welcome to be experienced and dealt with. So let's move on, because I want to be mindful of time. She's like, oh, what? He's looking at me. No, we actually take time very seriously in what we do. So we've got about 15 minutes and then we're done. But life-changing small groups, this is letter E, deliver affirmation. Affirmation. Life-changing small groups deliver affirmation. Now next to that, somewhere in parenthesis, write reality-based. Reality-based. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But quickly, what's the difference between encouragement and affirmation? Anybody got any ideas? Encouragement, affirmation. A little vocabulary quiz here. That you guys can-
Affirmation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Encouragement's doesn't have to be specifically on something. An affirmation is affirming or highlighting something that occurred or an aspect or a person.
Yeah. And what were you
I'm
gonna say?
looking at acceptance and affirmation.
Acceptance and affirmation. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Encouragement and affirmation. The thing that is interesting about encouragement and affirmation, I liked it because I did a little thing a few months ago and I realized this. Affirmation is sort of a present to past thing. It's affirming something about you that's already there. Encouragement is a present to future thing where you're saying, because of what has happened in the past, I am sure this will happen in the future with you, for you, by you. And so when I say reality-based affirmation, what I'm saying is you're giving an accurate picture of what is now of that person, right? So that takes away things that are going to be niceties, but maybe you can't guarantee that. So for instance, you're going to be fine, right? Somebody says, oh, I just found out I have a tumor. You're going to be fine. You don't know that.
I promise, yeah.
But here's an affirmation. I'm still going to be here with you. Different. That's what I'm talking about when we talk about affirmation and reality-based. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel helpless when somebody tells me something about themselves that I can't do a thing. So I think I gotta come up with something to say to help them feel better about this thing. And to the point where we were talking about, I'm gonna pray for you, sometimes people just need us to sit with them. And that may be our own journey of becoming comfortable with just sitting. My grandfather, I was 33 years old when he turned 100. And then he died a month after 100. His goal was to hit 100, man. Boom, he hit it. And then he had 30 days of sort of extraction, and he was on his way. So it was really interesting to watch him kind of go through this process. But as I think back, like moving back into my mid to late 20s and hanging out with him, and that guy could sit for hours, and I was so uncomfortable sitting with him because I wanted to fill the space with something, and I just would I would shake and he's not saying a thing. 5 minutes have gone by. I'm dying, because in your 20s you just got a lot to say. And but there would be times when he was in the retirement home and his health was beginning to decline. I'd go visit him, and I was clueless. I didn't know what to do, and he'd just sit there, and I'd just sit there, and I'd have all these weird, uncomfortable thoughts. And we'd sit for an hour, and I'd be like, "Grandpa, I gotta go," and he'd be like, "Oh, you're leaving so soon," and his understanding of time was so much different than mine was. But as I would go, he'd be like, "Sitting with you really helped me today. Thank you." Because the whole time he's sitting there, I'm like, this is so uncomfortable. I don't like this. This is weird. I feel uncomfortable. But it didn't matter. It helped him. And it meant a lot to him. Maybe you've had an experience like that, either on the giving or the receiving end, where you've just been amazed by just somebody sitting there. And there's a story about when the New Orleans flood thing happened. I read this story a while back, and they would move entire communities out of the area, and they'd set them up someplace else in the United States. Different places would open up. whole parks and whole communities. And there was an Air Force base or a military base in the Northeast United States, and the whole base had been decommissioned. So they moved an entire city to this base. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. I don't know how many people were there. But they're all in the same boat. They're all devastated. They're living these kind of homeless lives. And they're sleeping in barracks, and they don't know each other, and they're making the best do. But this went on for a few months. And they had one chaplain for the entire base. That was kind of given, spiritual oversight level thing. And as days kind of moved into a couple of weeks, people began to come to him and say, hey, there's this guy, Jack. He's not doing good. He's not doing good. The guy hadn't spoke. He hadn't uttered a word that anybody had heard for like 2 weeks. And he just sat alone all day long. Didn't know what to do. And the chaplain said, I didn't know what to do. I'd never been the chaplain of any disaster relief effort. I just happened to be there, and the people who were in charge of this thing said, you're the guy. And so he goes out to the guy, hey, Jack. Jack didn't say anything. Mind if I sit here on the bench with you? Jack didn't say anything. He sat down on the bench. Sat there for 15 minutes. And said, well, Jack, I'm here if you need me. And I'm kind of the chaplain and just kind of helping people figure this out. And he said, thank you so much for sitting with me. I feel like I can begin to kind of get involved here now. But later on they talked, and it was the sitting and the quiet. So this idea that we're talking about, this affirmation, sometimes isn't words. It's presence, just being present with people. So I just want you to know that's part of how this all works. And this is a part of the life-changing community that the Bible teaches. So let's talk about these buckets quickly. This is how we do this affirmation thing. And this is sort of a metaphor for you. This is page 4 at the top. We all carry 2 buckets in our lives. We carry a good bucket and a bad bucket. In the good bucket, we collect positive and affirming messages about ourselves. In the bad bucket, we collect negative and critical messages about ourselves. But the kicker here is the bad bucket is always full. The good bucket has a slow leak, and you're always having to refill it, right? And that's just because of the brokenness and sinfulness of where we're at. So if you have a good bucket, you need some positive and affirming messages. That's the purpose of small group, is to deliver those positive and affirming messages. Acceptance, understanding, grace, forgiveness, a listening ear, time. The bad bucket, the idea is we kind of want to outweigh or at least balance out the 2 buckets. Because what's happening is people come into any community that's Christ-centered, and they've been beat up all week up to that point. Some people are getting beat up by their spouses, verbally, emotionally. Some people by their kids. I was telling my wife last night, like, she's 5 years old, but I feel like I just got beat up by like a WWF wrestler. She can be so hateful because she doesn't have control of her emotions sometimes. And if she's having a bad day, we are all having a bad day. So we collect these negative messages. At work, depending on your work situation, that could be horrible. Just sitting in traffic, you can collect some negative messages by some of these people on the way to drive, right? And so what we're doing is we're moving into that arena of negative messages, and we're beginning to just balance that out. So that's kind of that reality-based. Here's some examples. I'm going to go through these quickly, but you'll get the gist of what I'm saying. A positive message. I love who you are as opposed to what you do. I love who you are. I have time for you. I'm sorry that hurts you. I believe in you. I can help you. Negative messages would be you're not smart enough. You're important if you do the right things. I hate that about you. And some of us have parents that gave us this one. I'll give you something to cry about. I knew you'd fail. You're on your own, etc. So this is, again, we're building up a recipe, a chemistry, something that we can begin to think through. How do I build a community in my family? How do I build a community in my work or in ministry? These are some of the parts and pieces. So let's talk about some next steps and then we'll be done. The first thing is model it. model it. Begin with yourself. Everything in the Bible that I've read and learned has never been about me making you be somebody, or grow into be the right somebody, or to grow up. What I have read, though, is model, experience your own change. It's amazing, and maybe you've had this experience. There have been people in my life, and I've seen them change. And I'm kind of like, hey, what are you doing? Because it ain't working for me. What's your secret? And you create almost a curiosity about it when you are working on yourself and growing and changing. But the idea there is you're just silently, quietly, kind of just going through this idea of creating safe environments for people and being a safe person. The next thing would be, letter B there, normalize it. Normalize safety, truth, and vulnerability. So this is where you, maybe you're not a leader yet, or maybe you are in a current context, but you own the fact that you don't have either like all the answers, you don't have it all figured out, you don't have it all together. You own that. And so what that means is you model the fact that there are parts of my life that aren't perfect. And I'm okay with it, and I'm okay to talk about it with you. So that's the idea of this normalizing it. Or in a small group setting or in a community setting, you grab hold of it, you notice it. So maybe somebody shares who they are at a deeper level. Well, you could take them aside afterward. Hey, that was cool what you talked about. That was really neat. Thanks for sharing that. Or if you're the leader of a group, like a small group, you could say, hey guys, that's what I'm talking about. That's what we want here. And you highlight it so that people know, oh, that's okay here. Because sometimes people come in and they don't know. Is it okay to talk about, I'm having a rough day at work? Or, and maybe a spouse comes but their partner doesn't. And they say, man, we're kind of having a rough time. It's not divorce, but it's just rough. We're going through a rough patch. That's allowed here. Now, you don't have to fix it, but it's allowed to, that expression's allowed. Letter C, ask for it. Enlist the help of others. The idea of that is, in whatever context you're in, if you find somebody who's kind of like doing what you want to do, or they feel like they could be that kind of person, you ask them, hey, I'm trying to do this in my life. Would you do it with me? Or if you're leading a group, a ministry, you go to somebody who seems to be a safe person and say, hey, I'm really trying to inject this safety thing in this ministry or this group. Would you help me do that? And you guys have conversation toward that. So that it's not just one person kind of a lone wolf, but you now have two people. In small groups, it's fun because the leader then finds somebody in the group, and then the leader doesn't have to feel like they have to be, because they're the leader, right? Then they have sort of like a secret weapon in the group doing the same thing. And before you know it, people are like, oh, I guess that's allowed here. We can do this because the leader said it was okay, and that person said it or did it or acted like it. So asking for it can be a really great thing to do. Letter D, facilitate it. One of my favorite things is this little piece here. Anybody here know, I'm not sure if I pronounce this right, Aristotelian persuasion? I found this, it's kind of cool. It makes me feel smart when I say it. Aristotelian persuasion. So Aristotle was a smart guy back in the BCs. And he had three things that he talked about that work for great communication. The first thing was, and you don't have to write the Greek down, but I just like to say it. Ethos, which was credibility. Credibility means you know what you're talking about, or somebody's saying you know what you're talking about. Logos means logic, that there's a system of thought that you've been able to figure it out. So you've got credibility, logic, and then pathos, which is emotion or heart, right? And he said if you get all these things right, you can persuade somebody else in communication. So the idea in our culture is we give credibility. Read any book that's on the bestseller list, and it's on the bestseller list, and yet you open the book and the first few pages are people endorsing it. That's credibility, right? Logos, logic, go to any like Sprint or AT&T or any store that sells cell phones, and they're going to give you all the reasons why this is the best phone for your needs. That's logic. You have this need, we have this phone with this many features. That's logic. And then pathos, emotion, or heart, that's where we're weak in our culture. We're not a culture that really engages emotion and heart. And so that's why we spend a lot of time on this first lesson, kind of front-loading this idea of paying attention to the safety. Because most people are living unsafe lives out there. And if they come into a ministry or a group or a civic organization or a club, chances are they don't have a context for safety. And if we're going to be salt and light in the world, here at Shadow Mountain, 2100 Greenfield, in a small group or just in our lives, people don't need more credibility or logic. They need more of this sense of connecting with their hearts and connecting with your heart. So that's a great thing. Facilitating means you just kind of model it through asking things about people's lives. And the best part that I like to say is ask feeling questions. Everybody asks what you think. Not a lot of people are asking what you feel. Now, you don't have to become psychologists, and if you're not touchy-feely, do this at your own discretion. But it's just something we like to make sure you know about. To give you some help on that, if you turn to page 7, we actually give you a little bit of a worksheet you can work on in your own time, where we talk about thinking questions and feeling questions. The top one there, how do people cope when they lose a loved one? That's a thinking question. Feeling question is, have any of you ever lost a loved one? How was that? And then turn back to page 5, really quickly, and I'll fill the last fill in. Stick with it. Give it time. Stick with it. Give it time. Remember, grace plus truth over time equals growth. This is the model that Jesus showed. This is the model the Bible teaches. And this is the model that we promote at Shadow Mountain. Shadow Mountain is not perfect, but this is what we're going for. And so the next 2 weeks, we'll shift gears from the community piece, and we'll begin to explore, now, how do you lead this? How do you function this way when you have people who are following you? Let me pray. We'll be all done. If you have questions or anything, I'll be here. God, thanks again for the people here. Thank you that we had this time this morning. I pray that as we've had this conversation, and over the next couple of weeks, that you, God, would be very much a part of the life change that's even going to occur off of this lesson and the 2 lessons coming. May the people here in this room take what they've learned today and go out and give it a try. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great day, guys. Thanks for coming.